Welcome to Magic Tale World, where every story comes alive with wonder. Let's open the book and begin our adventure together.
Once upon a time, there lived a poor miller who had 3 sons. When the miller passed away, he left his mill to his eldest son, his donkey to the second son, and to the youngest son, all he had left was a cat. The youngest son was very upset. "Oh, what will I do?" he sighed. "My brothers can make a living with the mill and the donkey, but what can I do with a simple cat? I shall surely go hungry." To his great surprise, the cat spoke to him. "Do not worry, master," the cat said with a clever glint in his eye. "Just give me a bag and a pair of boots made for a cat, and you will see that your inheritance is not so bad as you think." Though the miller's son was astonished to hear a cat talk, he was also curious. He spent his last few coins to get the cat a fine pair of boots and a sturdy sack. The cat proudly pulled on the boots, slung the sack over his shoulder, and with a jaunty wave set off into the world. This clever cat, now known as Puss in Boots, marched straight to a warren where he knew many plump rabbits lived. He put some fresh bran and tasty lettuce into his sack, laid it on the ground, and then lay down nearby, pretending to be asleep. It wasn't long before a young, foolish rabbit, smelling the delicious treats, hopped right into the sack. Quick as a flash, Puss pulled the drawstring tight and trapped the rabbit. With his prize in the sack, Puss in Boots didn't go back to his master. Instead, he walked proudly to the king's palace. He bowed low before the king and said, "Your Majesty, I bring you a gift from my noble master, the Marquis of Carabas." This was a grand name Puss had invented for the poor miller's son. The king was quite pleased with the plump rabbit. "Tell your master," sighed the king, "that I thank him and that his gift is most welcome." Over the next few months, Puss continued this trick. He would catch partridges, quails, and other game, and always present them to the king as a gift from the Marquis of Carabas. King grew very fond of this mysterious Marquis, and was always delighted to see Puss in Boots arrive at the palace. One day, Puss learned that the king and his daughter, the most beautiful princess in the whole world, were planning to take a drive along the river bank. He rushed back to his master. "Master, if you do exactly as I say, your fortune will be made. Go and bathe in the river at the spot I show you, and leave the rest to me." The miller's son, who had started to trust his clever cat, did just as he was told. While he was bathing, the king's royal carriage came into view. Puss in Boots immediately began to shout at the top of his lungs, "Help! Help! My lord, the Marquis of Carabas is drowning." The king heard the cries and, recognizing the cat who brought him so many fine gifts, ordered his guards to help at once. While the miller's son was being pulled from the river, Puss explained to the king that some thieves had stolen his master's clothes while he was bathing. This, of course, was another one of Pussy's clever fibs. He had hidden the old clothes under a large stone. The king immediately ordered that the Marquis be given one of the finest suits from his own royal wardrobe. Dressed in magnificent clothes, the miller's son looked so handsome and noble that the princess fell in love with him at first sight. And the king, seeing how dashing he was, invited him to join them in the carriage. Puss in Boots was overjoyed to see his plan working so well. He ran on ahead of the carriage. He came across some peasants mowing a meadow. "Good people," he said with a very serious look, "the king is coming this way. If he asks who this meadow belongs to, you must say it belongs to the Marquis of K. If you don't, you will be chopped into tiny pieces." The peasants were terrified and promised to do as he said. When the king's carriage passed by, the king couldn't help but admire the beautiful meadow. "To whom does this fine meadow belong?" "Ask it to my lord the Marquis of Carabas." The peasants all answered in unison, "You have a very beautiful estate," the king said to the miller's son. Puss ran on ahead again and came to a field where reapers were harvesting golden wheat. He gave them the same warning, and they too told the king that the fields belonged to the Marquis of Carabas. Puss continued running ahead, telling everyone he met to say the same thing, until the king was convinced that the Marquis was an incredibly wealthy and important nobleman. Finally, Puss in Boots arrived at a grand and imposing castle. This castle belonged to a fearsome ogre, the true owner of all the lands the king had just admired. The ogre was also a powerful magician, able to change himself into any creature he wished. Puss, never one to be scared, walked boldly into the castle and asked to see the ogre. He was led into a great hall where the ogre sat. "I have heard, sir," said Puss with a bow, "that you have the amazing ability to change yourself into any animal you choose. For instance, you could become a lion or an elephant." "That is true," boomed the ogre, a little proud. And to prove it, he instantly transformed himself into a roaring, fearsome lion. Puss was so frightened that he scrambled up the curtains, his little boots barely staying on his feet. Once the ogre changed back to his normal form, Puss climbed down, his heart still beating fast. "That was truly impressive," Puss said, trying to sound calm. "But I imagine it must be much harder to change into something very small. For instance, something as tiny as a mouse. I would think that is quite impossible." "Impossible," roared the ogre. "Nothing is impossible for me." And in a flash, he changed himself into a tiny little mouse, scurrying across the floor. That was the moment Puss had been waiting for. He pounced on the mouse and gobbled it up in one bite. And just like that, the fearsome ogre was gone forever. By this time, the king's carriage had arrived at the castle gates. The king was amazed by its splendor. "Does this castle also belong to you, Marquis of Carabas?" he asked. Puss in Boots ran to the gate and bowed deeply. "Welcome, your majesty, to the castle of my lord the Marquis of Carabas." The miller's son, looking as surprised as the king, invited them inside. They entered a grand dining hall where a magnificent feast, which the ogre had been preparing for his friends, was laid out. The king was so impressed with the charming Marquis, his vast lands, and his magnificent castle, that he turned to him and said, "My dear Marquis, it would be an honor to have you as my son-in-law." The miller's son, who was now truly a marquis, was overjoyed. He and the beautiful princess were married that very same day. And what about Puss in Boots? He became a great lord himself and never had to chase mice again, except for fun. He lived a long and happy life in the castle, always remembered as the cleverest and most loyal cat in all the kingdom. And so they all lived happily ever after I hope you enjoyed this wonderful story. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more magical fairy tales. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching Magic Tale World. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more magical adventures tomorrow. See you next time!